Welcome, everyone. My name is Kirsten Schwartz, and I get the honor of serving on our church team here at Generous Giving. And if you're hopefully here because you're part of a church or you want to help grow a culture of generosity in your church, our goal on the church team at Generous Giving is to come alongside and help you in building a culture of generosity in your church. And for those of you that might be new to generous giving, I think we've got a few friends on here that are familiar with us, but some of you, this might be your first time meeting us. I just want to give you a little bit of background about who we are. So, generous giving, it's important for you to know up front that we want nothing from you. We are privately funded by foundations and families, Christian families who believe in getting this message of generosity out there and that it's best received when done freely and that the Holy Spirit can really work. So, we don't want anything from you. We really just want something from you. Our mission at Generous Giving is to see the generosity of God displayed through the generosity of God's people. And what we're most known for is a retreat experience called the Journey of Generosity. And some of you may have heard about this. We're going to get into more detail about what the Journey of Generosity is towards the end of this presentation. And just so you know, we're affectionately refer to this as the JOG, but it's not a race. This is all just, it's actually a retreat that takes place mostly in living rooms. So let me show you a little bit about what that looks like. And so this is what a journey of generosity feels like. You sit in someone's homey living room where you can feel relaxed and you watch these inspirational videos about people. There we go. You guys can still hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. So people are living out radical generosity. And this is designed to be a place where nothing's expected from you. There are no strings attached. People can have open conversations and truly get into this in a way that they have never been able to have a conversation around generosity before. So what difference does a jog make? We care about data and being able to track if we're moving the needle on transforming hearts around generosity. So I'm going to share two studies with you. And I know if you're an executive pastor or pastor, this is probably important to you. I worked at a church for 8 years as director of generosity, and this data would have been important to me when I was discipling our people and trying to decide how do we best do this. So this first study is a qualitative study, and we did this by taking 100 people that had been through the JOG experience, and we did an in-depth interview with them. And the number one theme that came out of it was that it did transform their heart, and that's the main thing we care about at Generous Giving. And there were three other themes that emerged. One was that people found a greater surrender to Christ and his kingdom. Second, which I get most excited about, is people wanted to get more involved in their local church. And then third, that they had, because of that healthier identity in Jesus that grew out of it, it created healthier relationships with the people in their life. So we were really excited to see this. This is a study we just did last year. Then we also have a quantitative study. We did this in conjunction with the National Christian Foundation, and I see that we have a few NCFers on this call, and we love partnering with the National Christian Foundation. But for those of you who aren't familiar with NCF, they have a giving fund, essentially, a way for people to give through a donor advised fund, and they also handle complex gifts. But because of that, we were able to test a subset of people of 600 of them that went through a JOG and compare it to people a group of 1,800 people who had never been through a JOG, and look at their giving over a 10-year span. So this was a pretty in-depth study. What we found coming out of that is that 45%, that people that experienced a JOG, they increased their giving by 45%. And that's really exciting for us. The next was, and this is probably the part that I get most excited about, is that they sustain that year after year. So it just wasn't a one and done thing, which to me is indicative of true life change and true heart transformation. And then finally, the more they attended jogs and became a facilitator or a host or attended the generous giving conference, that they even gave at a greater rate than that. So we know that when people come out of a jog, they experience that life transformation. Right now, I'm gonna stop this presentation real quick, and I want to introduce you to Ryan Zellner. Ryan's on our team, and he is a pastor at a church in California, and he has facilitated many jogs with church staff, church leaders, and attendees. So, Ryan, can you share with us some ways that you've seen people come out of a jog changed?
Absolutely, Kirsten. So, uh, the beauty of the jog is it gives you time to sit and listen to what the Lord has for you. And as we're pulling out the scriptures and we're looking at videos and stories, we begin to understand that God has a calling on our life, that He wants us to steward well what we've been giving. And so that's different for everybody. It's not prescriptive in any way, but what we can get has a broad spectrum when people come out of this jog. So I've been with people and they've come to the end of the time and they're like, I've come to the conclusion that the Lord wants me to receive loved. I've pushed people away a lot. And I recognize that my church and my family, they actually want to help me. And so they've been kind of the strong, I'm going to do it by myself. And so through their time with Jesus, Jesus has like just convinced them like people are around you. I'm working through them and you don't have to do it alone. So that's one far end of the spectrum. The other far end of the spectrum was I just heard was a guy went through it and he decided that he's going to bump up his giving an additional $500,000 a year. So obviously he has the capacity, but some light bulbs went on of what he's able to do, what he could do, and what God wants him to do. And so there's so much things in between, like dealing with a heart of scarcity, a scarcity mindset, coming to understand that God is abundant. It'll bring a lot of couples together. I've seen them talk about money for the first time in a way that's hopeful and encouraging. And then they want to bring their kids into it. It gives them a common language and something to go through that they can begin to disciple their kids in this. Um, a small example from 2 weeks ago as well was there was a guy that had 5 guitars, and you realize I don't need to hoard these guitars. I'm going to either sell them or give them away and help kids learn how to play them. Um, I've known people that have not built their dream home, stayed in their home, and have used that money and land that they've sold off to fund kingdom work. I've known another one that moved because of their calling that God has put on them so they could live a life that's more generous. So those are just some of the ways. Kirsten, thanks for asking, but everyone comes out with a takeaway of what God is calling them into.
That's great, Ryan. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. We will be Ryan will be sharing some more things with us in later in the presentation, but he has great experience working on church staff. Also, just actually everybody on our team does. And one of the things that's important to us is understanding why this works for the church and why we want to make sure it works as you're trying to grow a culture of generosity there. And I know I felt that when I was on staff in the church, that the church expects me to lead and they expect me to lead on all things. And that even includes, about talking about money and generosity. And what I found was that we did not, as staff in leadership in the church, we did not always feel equipped to have these generosity and money conversations. And it wasn't necessarily the number one thing we learned about, people learned about coming out of seminary. Barna did a research study on the state of generosity in the American church in 2021. And they surveyed Christians around the US, and 80% of Christians said, hey, we believe pastors have a responsibility to teach us about what the Bible says about generosity. So we want to come alongside and help make that easier for you. But first, I want to talk to you about a framework that I learned when I was at my church. One of the challenges that my church leadership gave me, and they said, "Hey, Kirsten, is there a way to grow generosity in the church where we're not dependent on campaigns?" We'd been doing campaigns every 3 years since the beginning of the church, and people were kind of burnt out and exhausted on that. So I researched churches all over America. I studied best practices of churches of every size. I even gave money to about 40 churches just to see, hey, what happens when I give you money? Do you even notice who I am? How does your communication work? And that kind of thing. But there were two main themes that emerged that I noticed that were the most helpful as I was thinking through on how to build a culture of generosity in our church. And I'm going to walk you through those two perspectives right now. So the first one is if you were to look at everyone in your church, where they're at financially today. I usually can see this grouped in three different buckets. The first is those who are struggling financially. So they are in credit card debt, they aren't making it paycheck to paycheck, and they're really in that struggling place. For this demographic in your church, I highly recommend a stewardship program. So a budgeting program or something that's helping them understand how do I budget my money? How do I steward it well? How do I get out of debt? There's a lot of resources out there right now. There's a lot of new resources that are really connecting with Gen Z and millennials. If you want that list, we have it on our church resources page. This is also really well documented at the Christian Stewardship Network, and we have all of those links on our church resources page, which my team will be sharing in the chat. The second demographic in your church is those who are financially stable. I was really curious about reaching these people because I felt like we had a lot of people in our church who were warming our seats on the weekends, but not really getting their jersey dirty and getting in the game. And I could see that in our giving, where there was a lot of people who weren't giving, or at least as I could see it, that were being generous. And the third bucket is those who are entrusted with much, that have a surplus category. I used to show this graph with just maybe 10% being in surplus. But what's been interesting over the past couple of years, as I'm meeting with churches, I'll say, hey, what percentage of your congregation do you feel like is in surplus? And I get feedback back from churches that it's anywhere from 10, 20, 30. I've even seen 40%. So I think what we're seeing is there is an increase in wealth of people in the church, but there is a need to continue to disciple people with that. What I love about the JOG is it is excellent for discipling those who are entrusted with much. That is what Generous Giving 25 years ago originally created with this in mind, is how to show people who are entrusted with much how to live that out, radical generosity out with what God's entrusted them with. Over time, though, we have added more videos for those that are in the median income category so that we can create JOG experiences for people that really relate to them. For the struggling, we still recommend that you put them in, that these folks go through a stewardship curriculum to help them get out of debt. I don't think the JOG is the number one experience for them. However, if they do, usually people who are struggling will opt out of coming out of a JOG because they're aware that generosity might be really hard for them. But in the cases that I have seen struggling folks show up in a JOG, I've seen a light switch kind of go off where they want to go get in a stewardship class and get their money under control and get out of debt. So, all right. So we really recommend it for those two. The second thing that I think the church has a huge opportunity on is taking people from a transactional relationship with giving, especially as they're giving to the church, and making that into a transformational relationship. And I think churches unintentionally miss this and unintentionally just skip it. And let me go through a scenario with you. So let's say you're the senior pastor of your church and you're watering your people and you want them to be fruitful. You're teaching them what the Bible says. This is what you want them to become more like Jesus. But when you start talking about money, this can start to feel transactional. So I think what I see in the church is that we tend to avoid talking about money and generosity because we don't want it to feel transactional. And then we only talk about it at the end of the year when we have the end of the year giving ask, which really just affirms for people, oh, you really just also want my money. But what I believe we really want in the church is we want people to be fruitful and show generosity because it's the way God wants us to live as Christians, and that is about a transformational relationship. And so that is what we want to come alongside and help the church and their people experience. One of the ways to do this is discipling people from being owner of their money to stewarding God's money. So this is the second framework I'm going to walk you through. So this first stage of growth, I call the self-absorbed owner. This is where we believe we're at our most immature, we're our farthest from Jesus. We say, hey, everything I've got is mine. It's 100% mine. I put myself through college. I got my first job. All the money I have is because I earned it. And then what I see is people sit in the church on the weekends and they hear more messages about Jesus and they start to get closer to him. And churches will ask you for money and nonprofits ask you for money. And then people kind of grow to this bubble where they're an obligated owner, where they believe, okay, it's all mine, but I feel obligated to give. And they'll write the check, but it's painful. It's white knuckling it, but they do it purely out of obligation. Then the next stage that we see is that people at this point grow in their faith and make a decision for Jesus. So you might call this people getting saved in your church. They become a Jesus follower, they get baptized, however you word that in your church. But the point is they're in on the Jesus thing. And then what they do is they grow to this level, the obedient owner, where they say, okay, a portion of what I've got is God's, but the rest is mine. And I think the problem we've got in the church today is people don't even know there's a fourth way to live. And I think it's something we sometimes skip in the way we're communicating this at churches. So the fourth way to live is, hey, it's 100% God's. It's all his. And I'm going to use myself as an example here. So I had somebody older and wiser than me that was mentoring me. And this person leaned in and said, hey, Kirsten, you know, it's 100% God's, right? And I was like, oh, I know that. I give, I tithe, I even tithe pre-tax, and I give to nonprofits on top of that. So I felt like I was doing a really good job. And this mentor kind of leaned in and kept poking on that and said, no, Kirsten, it's 100% God's. And we kind of got into this dialogue where actually I got a little upset. I got a little aggravated. And I said, you know, I don't know what that means. What are you looking? What do you want from me? I am checking all the boxes and being a good Christian girl. Do you want me to live like a pauper? Do you want me? I've got a mortgage. I need to put my kids through school. Like, what more do you want here? And I realized in that moment, after I had that reaction, that I really hadn't sat in this question long enough. What does it look like if I live as if everything I have is 100% God's? To really figure out, what does that look like in my life? And how do I feel about that? And that's one of the reasons I love the JOG experience so much, because it provided a safe place for my husband and I to see examples of people living this out and to kind of come off of that Christian checklist of, okay, I'm doing these things, so I think I'm good with God, rather than really challenging us, how are we living open-handedly with everything God's entrusted with us? And it has just really transformed the way we approach generosity and how we fund the church, how we fund nonprofits, how we're teaching this with our kids. Getting back to some of the examples Ryan shared earlier of people even thinking about, how many guitars do I own, right? Okay, so this next part I want to talk to you about are the 5 things that I notice the most generous churches in America do. So remember I told you a little bit ago that when I worked as director of generosity at a large church, my leadership said, hey, Kirsten, what do we need to do to grow generosity and grow hearts of generosity in our church where we don't have to depend on campaigns? And there were 5 things that I noticed. And I tested these pre-COVID and post-COVID. And those of you that have been in the church through those 2 seasons know what I'm talking about, and that it was different. But these are the 5 things. Now, I can't go into major detail on all of these today. After this webinar, you're going to get an email, and we'll have a link to this talk, so that if you want to hear it in more detail, you can get it then. But here are the 5 things. I'm just going to give them a quick overview. One is weekend teaching, that the senior pastor is actually teaching on stewardship or generosity I'd say a minimum of every 1 year to 18 months, at least every 2 years, where you are not asking for money. So this is often really good at the beginning of the year in January or February timeframe. And second is that the church has a stewardship or financial ministry where they're teaching people how to budget and manage their money well, and what the Bible says about that. The third is they have some kind of strategy around high capacity givers and building relationship with them intentionally. Now, there are strategies here that get really complex and they're really simple ones. The simplest way to do this is just to take your high capacity givers through a jog. The fourth one is giver communication. And I'm really passionate about this because I believe giver communication is where the church makes your givers feel known, needed, and valued. And this is a number one place where you can say, hey, I care more about you than your money and the way that you respond to people when they give. There's four main places I have noticed that I've experienced that really are important in communicating with givers. And I go into that in detail in this talk that you'll get a link to in our follow-up email. And the final is metrics. So you need to be able to measure to know if you're winning and if the strategies you're doing actually are moving the needle. So I'll talk through some easy ways to measure that. But really, if all these things are together and you're able to get them all going, as my dad will say, you're cooking with gas. Like this strategy is working. And what I noticed in my church when we did this is we actually exceeded our stretch goal giving budget every year without doing a campaign. Now, generous giving, the jog retreat is really great in three of these places. So I think it's important to take your church leadership through because it ends up giving you a language and informing even a message that you can give on the weekend and setting your staff culture. I think that it's great for following up with a stewardship or financial ministry. So after people have gone through a stewardship program, a jog is a great next step for folks. And it is a slam dunk for your high capacity givers. I actually think there's nothing else out there that's probably better for discipling your highest capacity givers than this. All right, so next, how does the jog work? So for those of you that haven't experienced a jog yet, there's four main parts. There's group discussion, there is video stories, these inspirational video stories that are really well done. There's scripture reading, of course. But my favorite part is actually even at the end, we have a reflection time where you really get to sit and listen to the Holy Spirit and figure out, hey, what is God telling me and what am I going to do about it? There's a couple of different formats for you to use to do the jog. The first is a 2-day format. This is the best way to experience it. I found the easiest way for me to do this in the church was to do this locally, overnight in homes. And usually this is a Friday, late afternoon and evening where you provide dinner and everybody goes home and spends the night in their own home. And then they come back Saturday and you finish the retreat 8 to 12 on Saturday. And again, you just need somebody who's willing to host and all you're doing is providing the food. It's an even better experience if you can get away to a special venue like a lake or a beach house, or if somebody has one they can donate. Sometimes that can be difficult for people just to get their calendars together. But if that's an option for you and have that, I highly encourage you to use it. The local one is a great alternate option if you don't have, that special venue. The next way you can experience a jog is in the 1-day format. And I find this ideal for actually church staff and church leadership. Here you're meeting in a small group and it's from 9 to 4. We shorten the format just a little bit to be able to get through it in one day. And so in this case, you're just providing lunch on this particular day. Now, also works for churches that are starting to do this in a large group format where they're taking 20, 30, 40, 100 people through it at one time. In fact, we have one church where we did 6 sites at one time and simulcast from the main site to the other site. So we've done this a lot of different ways, but in this format, it really works well in a 1-dayer to take people through it from 9 to 4. And however, I do recommend go with the local jog first to get your highest capacity givers through it before you start the large jog. And then finally, we have an online jog every month that you can join. So if you're just like, hey, Kirsten, I need to check this out and make sure I like how this sounds, that the way you communicate this message sounds like us and is on brand for your church, great. We've got an online jog that you can go through personally and just experience it. But it is best for when you're doing this with your people, we recommend doing this in person. Okay, so this is how we support you. Facilitators. We have hundreds of trained facilitators around the country. So especially for your first time, we will send you a facilitator. There's no charge for this. We will send you resources for you to the JOG booklets, the pins. We'll even send you the name tags, and we're here to help coach you in your strategy and how to actually do this. So so here, let's go on to how to launch and create momentum with the JOG. So what we recommend as your first best step is to take your church leadership through a JOG. So this would be your senior pastor. This could be your executive pastor. Depending on the size of your church, you might have a big leadership team. If you're a smaller church, you might have an elder or deacon board that is really helping you with leading your church, and that might be considered your leadership team. But this leadership team, these are the culture changers, the cultural influencers in your church. And you want to take them through this first to get buy-in. Then after that, I recommend starting with your highest capacity givers. And if you're a smaller church, this could be the top 5% of your givers. If you're a larger church, this might be more of the top 1% of your givers. But mainly what I've seen is that high capacity folks get excited about generosity. And the ones who are already sold on this and are giving to your church in a big way already believe it. And oftentimes they just haven't had the opportunity to volunteer and get ignited in being a generosity champion volunteer for your church. So what we'll usually see is after people go through a JOG, a few of them are going to raise their hands and say, hey, I want to become facilitator trained. And we can take them through that facilitator training. And then after that, you're probably going to find more people that also want to get facilitator trained. And the great thing is they really are coming alongside the senior pastor to own that message of generosity. And that's how you really start to shift a church culture, is when the senior pastor is talking and teaching about it from a biblical perspective. But then you also have church volunteers who are not paid church staff saying, we believe in this. We believe that our church wants the joy of generosity for us more than they want it from us. And we want to see God's generosity displayed through our people. Then people get on board with this culture and you really start to see some beautiful things happen. I also think that it's great to take your staff through this. And most of the time, staff, I'm not saying that I don't think your staff need to be able to understand all the theology on how stewardship and generosity is worded in the Bible. But I do think that it is helpful for them to be able to articulate their own generosity story with God and where their heart is. So that when those conversations come up with volunteers, they have a common language that everybody can talk to, and they're not scared to talk about it. They're actually excited to talk about it. I've seen the JOG resource the staff in that way. So these are 3 people I would take through the JOG. You want to get your pastor through it. I recommend taking all of the staff in your church through it and identifying who might be those generosity champions, those high capacity people that you could start to take through it first, and that could help own moving this movement through your church. All right, so after you've kind of started that, what do you do after that, after you've done your first JOG with your people? What we see is the best way to use this to catalyze a generosity movement is that you continue to do JOGs probably 2 to 4 times a year. So for smaller churches, I recommend this 2 times a year. For larger churches, I'd say do them at least once a quarter. At my church, I was running these once a month. So you just have to decide which rhythm is best for you. But it was actually not a huge lift on staff because I had volunteer facilitators who were taking people through the experience. I had volunteers who hosted, and and then Generous Giving provided the materials to me for free. So this really became a normal culture in our church, and people loved going through it. Now, what I also recommend is that people, after they've gone through a JOG, they get excited about this conversation, but then we all know, you go to a marriage retreat or any kind of retreat and you're on fire for it that weekend, and then, time goes on and it can start to fade. But to keep this alive, one great way to do this is a JOG reunion. And this is really simple, you guys. This is probably the easiest play you'll ever make. So this is, think about a happy hour on a Thursday or Friday from 5:30 to 7. This is an hour-and-a-half experience. You find somebody who loves hosting and say, hey, everyone that's been to a JOG, just come over. We're going to have a community fellowship time with some appetizers and some drinks. And it just provides a place where people can get together and start talking. And all you do is program 15 minutes during that time. where you watch a video by Generous Giving. Usually, I recommend ones on legacy or living this out with your children are best. And then you say to the group, hey, what stood out with you? What stood out to you? And people just naturally start sharing, hey, this is what stood out. And they'll refer back to their original JOG experience and say, hey, God really told my husband and I that we probably should do this, but we haven't taken any steps in it yet. But we started thinking about it, and just I've seen crazy things come unlocked in these reunions where people get excited to get together with others and then meet other people that have also gone through the JOG experience. And it just, when you get people who are passionate about generosity in the same room together and you're seeding that conversation when you're not asking anything from them, amazing things happen. These people solve problems. They're coming up with ways to be generous that I didn't even think of. And it's also a great time for, if you're the senior pastor or executive pastor, to stop by and rub shoulders with people, get to know them when you're not asking them for money. So it affirms that, wow, my church really cares about a transformational relationship with me. They really care about the joy of generosity from me, more than they want it from me. And this is what I've noticed, is that churches that are healthy and talking about stewardship and generosity, when people get that and that culture is healthy, I've also noticed giving goes up. And that's what I experienced at my church. All right, so next I'm going to introduce to you one of our staff people. This is Melissa Zwick. She's here to help us on all things generosity. She has launched JOGs at her church, and she is on our staff. And Melissa is going to give us an update on some statistics and what we're seeing with church JOGs. Melissa.
Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm super overjoyed to be on this team, and we really do count it a privilege to be here with you. Okay, some fun facts. Last year, we had 2,000 people in church go through JOGs. This year, we have already had 2,300 people experience JOGs in church, and we're actively working with 250 churches, and we really want to be a support and a help to stir generosity in your churches too. Kirsten mentioned the jogs at our church. And I really found the jog was not just a significant personal growth opportunity for us, but even more importantly for our church at the time, it was a healing experience. So we would really love that for all of you. So now I'm here because of that experience to serve you and work through that experience in your church, to help invite people to a jog, because what in the world is a jog? We have this great video we want to share with you. Do you have that queued, Kirsten?
Yeah, just give me 1 second here.
Let's be honest, it's kind of not awesome when someone strikes up a conversation about generosity only to ask you for money in the very next breath. Wouldn't it be great if there was a place you could go and just have safe, honest conversations about money? You could relax and really explore and understand biblical generosity in ways like never before. How generosity is beautiful. It brings freedom, joy, and how, well, you've never really met an unhappy, generous person. But then, what if you also knew that no one was going to ask you for money at the end of the conversation? Huh. Sounds a lot like a jog. But no, not that kind of a jog. Think less perspiration, more inspiration. The journey of generosity. You're invited, and it's free because we want nothing from you. We just want something for you to connect to the heart of a generous God and experience the life that's truly life.
All right. Was everybody able to hear that? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, I'm always, last minute wanting to make sure everything works. All right, so now we have time for some questions. So I'm looking through our questions right now to see. Scott, I see you said that you used this video for the weekend. It worked well. That's great. So you can enter questions in the chat, or you can feel free to just unmute and ask us a question, and we'd be happy to help.
Good morning, Glenn Salzman here from Issaquah, Washington, and I'm the lead elder at our church. And how do you navigate when you don't know who the big givers are in your church? So we've kind of have it set up that we don't know who gives what so that we don't feel the pressure to um, talk about hard things differently with them and that type of thing. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, Glenn, I'm glad you asked that question. We've got a solution for that. So typically, in these situations, you at least have one person who is on the finance team who can see giving. And if you're open to this, what I do recommend is that this experience is best for those that are a high capacity individual. If they can experience a jog with their peers, with other high capacity people like them, this really unlocks things. Like we really see that they're able to go deep, and it's a freeing and a conversation that they've never been able to have before. When you get somebody who is that high capacity person and they're with people that are in a lower income bracket, we notice those high capacity people don't share as much because they don't want to make folks feel bad. So this is what I would recommend. Especially because I think it's best to keep those high capacity people together first. I would ask your finance leader for, hey, who's the top 20 and mix them up. Don't tell me, who's first or second, but at least if you can get an idea of who those folks are and get them together. If that is absolutely not an option for you, my guess is you've probably got a pretty good gut on who is more of a high capacity person. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky, right? Because we all have high capacity people in our church, and some give and some don't. So we want that growth for both people. And I like starting with the people who are giving because that's how you get momentum. They're already bought in, they believe in your church, and they're already living it out. And usually this just continues to fuel them and they get excited and want to help lead that in your church. But, and then at the same time, you've got high capacity people who maybe aren't living that way and you want to see that released for them. So it's, even if you had the list, I feel like you've probably got a gut on who those high capacity people are, and just go ahead and, they're going to get mixed up in that, and that's okay. I've still seen that go really, really well. A lot of times, a good way to start is with all the elders. Oftentimes, the elders or deacons in a church are typically the highest givers in the church also. So if you're starting with them, you're usually, clicking off a few of those for sure. And usually those kind of people know who the other people like them are. So you could say, hey, why don't you host a jog for us? And then they invite the people in church that they know. Ryan, do you have any other advice to offer on this?
I think you covered that one well.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to let that rest.
All
That
right.
was good.
I do. This is one of the places where I do think your highest capacity people who have been entrusted with much do need discipleship in this. And I think it's worth it to know who they are so that you can disciple them well. Just like we disciple single moms differently, we disciple men's groups different from women's groups, so that we understand where people are at, not with the intention of casting judgment, but the intention of growing people to be more like Jesus, which I think is all the other types of segmentation we do in small groups in the church. But I understand there are reasons that churches are nervous about that. And Glenn, I'd be happy to talk to you about it more in detail if you want after this call.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Kristen, I had a question, please.
Yes, Nancy.
Do you get into the detail of where the monies are directed? Because in our church in particular, we have a history of people having special charities, missionaries, programs that they like to support. And how does that work in this model?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. So at Generous Giving, we don't tell people where to give. We're really big on this. That's why the JOG experience works so well. So there is no ask at the end of the JOG, and nobody's allowed to ask for money at a JOG. And what we see is that through that, people really start talking about, gosh, where should we be giving and what should we be giving? And this is just what I've noticed. When I did JOGs at my church, and the church is leading that generosity conversation, and you're leading it in a healthy way where you're not just asking for money, I notice people give more to the church because they trust the church. If the church is being transparent about where their money is going and how they're spending it, and if the church is also saying, hey, we really care more about this for you than we want it from you, it increases that trust and people get excited and wanting to fund that church vision. But part of what is so critical to the JOG working is that we do no ask at the end, and nobody's allowed to do an ask. But like I said, it's continuing to grow that discipleship in people's hearts. I do think it's important that the church is able to report out on what works for you. Like, are you doing with your money what you say you're doing with it? I cover this a little bit in the webinar, and that's other talk you'll be able to get on the 5 wheels, that'll be in your email. And there's some websites where you can really examples of other churches where you can go to and see how they present on this. And I think that really helps with giving too. But our goal is we want to see all kingdom initiatives funded, churches and nonprofits that are serving God. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Kirsten, there's Dean ended up writing in the chat, as you were working through the 4 steps of development towards from owner to steward, do you emphasize tithing to your local church as a step towards generous living?
Yeah, thank you for that, Dean. The whole tithe. Yeah, that's this. I always hope this question comes up. Brian, would you like to answer?
Well, I would just want to point out that your 4 circles is a way to help understand where people are, that's not actually in the journey of generosity, but it's a way that we can look at some categories. And the whole journey of generosity is designed to see people and that they view their life, their things, their time, their energy, everything that they own as God's. And so we're shooting for, hey, you are a steward, and how does that work out? And so that's where we're going for with the journey of generosity, is that last bucket.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Bob, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. Oh, you're on mute. But I don't want you to crash while you're driving.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. The question I have, I'm not driving, my wife's driving.
Oh, great.
The question I have is, could you describe the difference between a large format group jog versus a regular jog, and how that would be used in a church setting?
Oh, that's great. Thanks for asking that. Okay. So I personally think it's best for you to do the small group jog first. And that is that short video you saw earlier where people are sitting in a living room and they're all hanging out with they're able to do this with like anywhere from 8 to 14 or 15 people is usually what we see in that living room setting. At a large format jog, this is normally in the church building and in your fellowship hall or one of your larger open auditorium rooms. And people sit around those 8-foot round tables that most churches have for small groups. So we'll sit 8 people to a table. For large format jogs, we send you the facilitator who is trained to really MC this because it's really kind of a bigger event on stage. And we'll send that trained facilitator to you who is going to walk everybody through the experience. But the discussion actually happens at the group tables. So you can see how this can be scaled anywhere from 20 people even to 100 people, just how many tables you have and having people sit around them. What we do what helps this is that table hosts are assigned so that we work with the church ahead of time to say who's going to be really good at helping people move through conversation, quieting the over talkers, getting the under talkers to work, people who will model sharing vulnerably. And most churches have, 50 of these people that they can pick to be at a table and just help with the conversation. So they don't have to all be trained facilitators who are sitting at those smaller tables, but it is helpful if they are. We have some churches who do this and every single table has a trained facilitator at it. But that's kind of how we are able to do a similar experience, and you're able to experience all of the videos, but we do it in that larger format. We just kind of cut it down. Does that help?
Yes, great.
Thanks, Bob. All right. I'm looking through here to look for any more questions.
Kristen?
Yes.
Is it permissible to network? I would love to have Nancy Forage's contact information from Perry since she's in Georgia. Is that Perry, Georgia? Okay. I put it in the chat, my number if she wanted to text me her personal and her contact information.
Great, Betty. We'll make sure to connect the two of you. So
Thank
I've got both of your email addresses, and I'll make sure to do an intro for you too. That'd be great. We do love making friends at Generosgiving. It's kind of like whoever is on this generosity journey, we all start to kind of link arms wherever we're at in the country and share best practices. We're working with churches of every size, you guys. So we're working with church startups, church plants who are meeting in living rooms still, all the way to churches of 500, 800, couple thousand to multi-site mega churches. So we've seen this message really unlock this idea of extravagant generosity for people, regardless of what setting you're in. Any other questions I can answer for you?
Kirsten, I'll just say that there's so many different ways to get started. I know that we talked about everybody in the room. Let's get you in a jog, and let's get the staff in a jog, elders in a jog. So that's like step one, step two. But then after that, there really is, and this is where the church team comes alive, is we'd love to understand your church, any unique things about it, and then we can give suggestions on how we've seen other churches do it. Where is it a full from up front? You're saying, hey, we're all going to go through this, and there's some churches that do that, or is this more like subversive, under the water? Like we're pulling people aside and we're saying we have something we think it would be great at, or do you have natural kind of breaks in the schedule for the church where you go on a retreat once a year as a church? Then could this take focus 1 year on that? So there's so many different ways that have been doing it. Some more official, some more under the radar, but it all depends on the church. And so once you get through it, once you get in a jog, I think you'll have the curiosity and the what's the word I'm thinking about? Help me out here. Imagination to think, oh, this is how my church can run with this.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of experience on our team, from Melissa and Ryan working on churches and doing this, where we can help you figure out what's the best way to do this with maybe some unique circumstances you have. So our team is here to come alongside and help you. Betty, you asked if we have another Zoom meeting planned to share. So we will do more webinars. Now, with the follow-up email you're going to get after this, you'll get a recording link of this meeting. So if you want to share this webinar with some other people, you'll be able to do that. And we really hope that after this, guys, we are here to serve you. We want to be able to get a jog on the calendar for you to experience it, especially starting with your leadership. And yeah, so feel free to reply to us when you get this follow-up email. Melissa, any thoughts?
I was going to say that in the follow-up email, and when you go to the resource page, there's a small form you can fill out. You can give us some details about what you might be looking specifically to chat about, and so that we can help you move forward and get some jogs going at church.
I have a question, Kirsten, and actually that I'd like to open up to the crowd. Friends, I'm on the GG team as well. So I would be curious in our last few minutes here, if there aren't any questions, I'd like to know why you joined the call today, and maybe what you hoped for or what you're seeing in your church that made you interested in wanting to know more about building a culture of generosity, just so we can learn from you.
That's a great question.
Maybe if just one or two, three people want to share.
This is Bob Wright. You're Kristen and Ryan too have been such a help to us in trying to bring this message into other churches in our family of churches. And so any opportunity I get to be with you guys, I'll take it. And Ryan, he led a jog that one of our pastors went to, and that pastor was trained as a facilitator. And Ryan, do you know about the the jog that they did, the large group jog that
Oh yeah,
Kyle and Eric did.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it grows. This thing is a snowball. And so if someone's just starting out, and I feel like I'm starting out, but I've been doing it for a while, the snowball gets bigger. And God, it's the Lord, it's the gospel, and it's the power of Jesus. His Holy Spirit is working through this ministry, and the power that results from it, and the love and the extension of generosity. I just love it all.
Bob, I can feel that through the video from you. And that's one of the things I love about this family. We all really kind of link arms and share what we're learning with each other. If there are unique challenges in your church that you're trying to understand, and we know of another church that's doing the exact same thing or looks similar to you, we'll facilitate an introduction. Even Bob's you've got how many churches do we have at Sovereign Grace, Bob?
65, but there's 65 that are working on coming in.
Yes, so 65
So,
churches. And Bob
right.
is you're what I would call a generosity champion. You're not paid church staff. You're somebody who loves this message and wants to come alongside your church leadership and get this into all 65 churches and your church family. And this is what I love seeing. When we see the senior staff and the church staff come in and are co-laboring alongside each other with a volunteer who's on fire for this, it just takes off and snowballs, like you said, Bob. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
I've met Kristen. We brought her into our group of churches that we serve in the Washington area, and at that time I wasn't part of a jog, and so I didn't understand this small group concept. I kept saying, let's get 100 people in there. And so I went through one without, I'm connected to Glenn Salzman, who's on this call. He's our lead pastor. And so my wife and I did one about 3 months ago through someone that I knew, and realized the power of a small group. So much so that I went back to Glenn, who's on this call, and said, okay, let's just start with 12. And so the elders and our wives are coming together next month to do our first jog. And then I found that in a smaller setting, I think vulnerability starts to open up. I've been to a big one where there was kind of like a 2 hour one, almost like an intro. What's the name of that, Chris? There's something.
A generosity conversation. You went to a
Yeah,
lunch.
and it was good. It was good. It's just the vulnerability didn't come out. And you understand, I mean, you only have 2 hours and you only have maybe 30 minutes to share openly. It's just not going to happen. But for the 12, and I didn't know any of them. My wife and I went to one that was outside of our church network. And but we found that through honest conversation for people that we didn't know, I was stunned at how open people were about just living a generous life. And so, of course, I called Glenn right away. I said, okay, we're going to do this. We got to do it now. With people that we know and love. I mean, the elders, we lock arms, serve in every capacity in a church family. And I admit we're just not regular discussion points for the reasons that you pointed out, Kirsten. And now we're at a place where we live in the Microsoft, Amazon areas. We know there's affluent people in our church, but we have committed to not announce opportunities to give from a need base. We want to give it a God generated deal. Give because God was generous to you, and it's been good. The very few spotted times that we have done that has been good. And I think we're on the cusp. The elders starting out first, and we're going to go to like the deacons and their spouses, and then like the small group leaders and then just let it play out. Kirsten and I decided to go ahead and be a facilitator after our group here for the elders coming up here next month. I've already reached out to, I can't remember who I talked to, somebody over there, and we're gonna do the, what do you call it, the online version or the whatever it is for to be a facilitator. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. What I personally experienced that this topic, generosity, while it may scare people, I found the gospel comes out in beautiful colors that you just, I don't know, it comes out in other ways too, in other conversations, relationships, giving, missions. It's all good. But when you get to generosity, it's honest conversation, it's safe. The beauty of the gospel just, it's like it explodes in different colors. And you walk away saying, I want to be like Jesus. And he was a generous person. He gave his life away. And so it was just a very moving experience for us among people that we didn't know. What's it going to be like, when we experience it with people that we fellowship with every week? So it was a very powerful experience.
Oh, Pete, I love hearing this story and how much has happened since I last talked to you.
Yeah. Well,
And
just a fun follow-up, Kirsten. We had that webinar that you co-hosted with us, and I think I had a dozen people say thank you. We're going to reach out. I don't know if they have, but that was the impact that the webinar had, how you presented it to everybody. I think people are hungry for it. Um, and so it's just having the courage and the resources. And I just applaud Generous Giving Ministries who took all the typical roadblocks away of why we don't talk about it. And we're just having honest conversations with it. And it's pretty cool to watch.
oh, I love that. And what I hear is that it's empowered you. It's empowered you to be able to talk about it without it feeling so awkward because God's giving you that language. It's so great. Um, Pete, thanks for sharing. Bryant, thanks for your comments. We would love to hear things you're learning too. We're trying to always gather what you're learning in church because we're learning too. And each year we're going to continue doing these kind of webinars and continue cultivating best practices. Shelley, you asked, are there other ways of addressing giving in the JOG? And I'm glad you asked that. So time, talent, treasure are the typical three that a lot of churches will talk about. Yes, our stories talk about all of them. So you're going to see stories about people giving their time. You're going to see stories about people giving their skill sets. But we don't skip over money. That is still a part of it. And I think sometimes, also, I feel like it's the hardest part to talk about. So that's why I feel like the JOG does such a good job of highlighting all three, but not shying away from money. In fact, empowering people around that topic. Brian, I'm trying to read your comment real quick. I just really appreciate you commenting. All right, you guys, we're almost at time. I would love to hear stories from each of you that have done this. We're probably going to continue doing a lot more of these webinars, so stay tuned. And we want to continue learning from you too. So our team is here to serve you. Any question you have, we want to hear it, and we want to come alongside and help you get around obstacles or whatever feels like you would look like help for you and getting JOGs going in your church. So Melissa's going to get that follow-up email out to you, and you'll see links on there, and just reply to that and find out, and we'll be here to have that dialogue with you, and we'll get somebody from our church team on the phone with you to be able to talk through whatever it is you need. Guys, thanks for your time today. I know your time is valuable and we really appreciate it. And thanks for the stories, Bob and Pete. I really appreciate those personal testimonies.